that grows Igbo behind your house, they won't own it. They will say it is your own. And when they say it's your own, they will arrest you and your problem will begin. So but for mineral resources, that is their own. So and that is why you have these agitations for resource control and so on and so forth. And then Section 20 has made the states the boy of the federal government. Why has it said that the state shall ensure that the maritime domain are kept clean, that they are kept unpolluted at all times. Keep it clean, keep it unpolluted, but let them come and harvest what is in it. That's what Section 20 is talking about here. Then, going for the paragraph 2 of the second schedule of the Constitution, has listed shipping and other maritime matters and related matters in the exclusive legislative list. So, that is one of the things that have been dragging us back. You look at the Bakassi port, they spent billions, but in the end, it didn't work. I will tell you why. You look at the Bakassi seaport, they spent billions. In the end, they were frustrated. I believe that what our governor is building behind your house, when we progress, something will have to be done. Right. And then we also look at Section 251, we're looking at how the Constitution concerns the maritime industry in Nigeria. Section 251 is that provision that has vested exclusive jurisdiction on the Federal High Court with respect to shipping and admiralty matters in Nigeria. So there are a lot of cases, let me not bother us with citing them, but just suffice for you to know that even our courts have upheld those provisions, that no other court can entertain matters of maritime admiralty except what the Federal High Court. The next law here is Oil in Navigable Waters Act of 2004. Oil in Navigable Waters Act is the law that seeks to prevent the pollution of the waterways by oil and oily substances. Now, this law, naturally, is supposed to be a local domestication of the treaty called Convention for the Prevention of Pollution of the Sea by Oil, MAPOL and OIPO, as well as their protocols. It's supposed to represent them. But funny enough, this is a 1968 act that has never been updated. And you discover that all those conventions that it pretends to have domesticated, they have been updated more than 13 times. And then we are still saying we have this law. So it's basically of no use when you compare it to what is happening internationally. Then we also have the Federal Environmental Protection Agency Act. This act is the act that has established FEPA, Federal Environmental Protection Agency, and given the duty to ensure, because for the agency to ensure that our environment is not polluted. But somehow it deviated from its course, forgetting that oil in navigation waters is still extant. It starts talking about oil pollution. As if oil pollution is all that we have and know about. Well, the good thing is that this act is no longer subsisting. It has not been repealed. We'll talk about the act that repealed it. And then the Petroleum Act. The essence of the Petroleum Act, just like the oil and navigation waters, is to ensure that our water courses are not polluted by oil and oil substances, especially by petroleum or oil workers and explorers. Now, this Petroleum Act now exists side by side with the Petroleum Industry Act of 2021. The latter act has not repealed the former. But what it has done is to look at the regulation, the physical and financial regulation of the oil sector, as well as to introduce what is called local content. So the laws complement each other as one, as the legal frame, part of the legal framework of maritime law in Nigeria. I can also talk about the Admiralty Jurisdiction Act 2004. Admiralty Jurisdiction Act is basically that law that has defined what constitutes admiralty matters in Nigeria, how to go about maritime litigation, dividing them into action in rem and action in personnel. Then the Nigerian Ports Authority. The Nigerian Ports Authority Act is an act that established the Nigerian Ports Authority and given the duty to manage and regulate seaports in Nigeria. But one visible lacuna in this law is that it is silent on the powers of the authority to even recommend for siting of seaports. But the same act has given the authority the powers to establish offices over the whole world. What for? If you cannot even go around to say, we need to expand, let's have a seaport here. And most annoying aspect of this law is Section 6. Section 6 says that no seaport, if you like, build it up to American standard, no seaport qualifies to be a seaport until the president has so pronounced. Do you now see why the Bakassi seaport failed? You now see why Bakassi seaport failed? You now see why Osakwa seaport could not be actualized. It's because of laws like this. We are talking about colonial mentality, but here is a local law with colonial mentality. Now we talk about Merchant Shipping Act. Briefly, Merchant Shipping Act is the legislation that guides shipping in Nigeria. But one glaring defect here is that this law doesn't say anything about seaport. Not even to empower the minister to go around the country and make recommendations for the siting of seaports, knowing very well that these are things that can derive revenue, bring wealth to the country. And we have this kind of law that has decided to be silent on the areas that it is worth guiding and regulating. Then we also have this Coastal and Inland Shipping Cabotage Act of 2003. So it's popularly known as the Cabotage Act. Cabotage is purely Spanish. Cabotage simply means a trade, an act of trading from coast to coast of the same country. But one thing, and during the colonial era, we had coasting trade. Even before the colonial era, the South-South, the riverine area, also engaged in coastal trade, but without regulation. So what this law has done now is a kind of a regurgitation of the practice of coastal trade that we had before the advent of colonialism. Of course, with the intention of fusing local content. How has this act fused local content? Section 3. Section 3 has made it specific that coasting trade in Nigeria simply means trading from one coast to another, or transportation of passengers from one coast to another within Nigeria, but it's restrictive in nature. Restrictive in the sense that it is not open for any country apart from Nigeria to participate in our cabotage. In other words, it has adopted what is called the Jones Act, the Jones Act of USA of 1952, which has long been amended because no country can exist alone. You cannot say, we want to do this in ours. Do you even have ship? Do you have trawlers? Except the ship is registered owned wholly by Nigeria is impossible. Who built it? So what is obtainable in practice? And you see a situation where those foreigners will just come and say, we are going to do business. The ship will answer your name and they will be exporting and taking it back home. So this is not the kind of law that we want as far as cabotage is concerned. Then the Sea Fisheries Act. This is another beautiful legislation, but with a lot of faults. This act encourages fishing. So you know, in some villages, they will tell you that fishing is for the poor person. Fishing is for those who don't want to go to school. No. Fishery is an interport. It's something that gives a lot of money if done properly and mechanically. Now, what this act has done is to prohibit harvesting of fish through poisons, through gaseous substances, gamoline, and so on and so forth. Beautiful. But what this law has not done, it has not talked about the increase in biodiversity. What do I mean by that? In the developed countries, you are not allowed to just keep fishing. There must be quantity of fishing that you are allowed to do. And if they feel, the minister, let me call the minister now in quote, feel that this place is being overfished, he stops it. And there are rules of fishing, part of which is that some types of fish, you catch it, you look at the condition of the fish, and you ask yourself, is it harvestable? If it is not harvestable, drop it. We are talking about things like the ovoviviparous and the viviparous. So what do they stand for? Pregnant fish. You catch a pregnant fish, what do you do? Throw it back to the sea. So that's why at times you see them fishing, they will catch a fish, they will throw it back. Because they know it is a crime to go home with a fish with eggs in its belly. And then again too, that's how aquarium developed. Get all these fish, put them in an aquarium. When they hatch eggs, take those fingerlings, throw them back to the sea so that you have multiplication. So that's the way to go. That's the international standard. But this law does not measure up the international standards. And then the next one is National Oil Spill Detection and Response Agency Act. The simple thing that this act is out to ensure is to make sure that those companies by whose functions must spill oil, you must have a tabulation of the quantity of oil that you're going to spill within a given period of time. And then you also have to submit measures to do what? To clean up the oil. So that when it exceeds that, you know that there is trouble. And then from here, we'll move to international legal framework. Just a second. The international legal framework is actually the law, when domesticated, that will make us to rub shoulder with the big powers of the world. So we're going to see that all we do is that we sign signature. We are signatory to most of them, but we do not domesticate them. The first one is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, 1982, UNCLOS 3rd. Now, briefly, permit me to use 2 minutes to give us the background of this law. There was a time when the period of Mare Liberum, that is freedom of the sea. Everybody was doing anything they liked with the sea. There was no regulation. There was no regulation. And then in the 13th century, down to the 17th century, there was this rule of canon short. The canon short is the rule that authorizes a coastal state to exercise a national jurisdiction upon its waters up to 3 nautical miles. Up to 3 nautical miles. So what that means is that after the 3 nautical miles, the rest of the ocean is a no man's land. Linus Gerald. No man's land. So America decided to cash on this opportunity. They now started annexing both the territorial waters, the exclusive economic zone, the contiguous waters, as well as the continental shelf, even up to the high seas. And when they did that, Argentina followed suit, Spain followed, a couple of other countries followed, but United Nations started to fight against that. It only succeeded in 1982. What it did was to create a regime of the use of the ocean, so that no country is undermined in the use of the ocean. If there is nothing in the ocean, why would America be struggling? Why would America be punishing people, killing people, just to have control of the ocean? It tells you that there is immeasurable wealth in the sea. Now, what this law did was to divide the oceans into segments and conferring it on what is called national jurisdiction. So under a national jurisdiction of a particular coastal state, you have the territorial waters. A national state has the jurisdiction to operate within its territorial waters to the extent of 12 nautical miles. That's not enough. Then there is also an addition to that, which is the contiguous water zone, also given to a coastal state, which is also what, 12 nautical miles. And then assuming the state is apologetical in nature, that's when you have, lakes here and there. It's not like you have a straight sea from the baseline to wherever you're going to measure, but you have lakes here and there. So that kind of state is also acknowledged under this law and given the same right as those that have clear territorial waters that could exercise jurisdiction on 12 nautical kilometers measured from the baseline waters, and then additional contiguous of 12 kilometers. Then apart from that is the main aspect of the sea or the ocean. That is the exclusive economic zone. The exclusive economic zone is so important because that is where you have the largest deposit of minerals. That is where you have the wealth itself. And that's also where you have the phytoplankton pastures. And which America was crazy about. So a country can exercise jurisdiction over its exclusive economic zone, 200 kilometers measured from the watermark up to 200 kilometers in measurement. And then after that, a country can also exercise jurisdiction over its continental shelf. That is also where you have more of the wealth. For the continental shelf, a country is given not less than 350 nautical miles, measuring from the baseline. But as for the high seas is a no man's land. So you can do anything you like at the high seas, except maybe when a crime is being committed, a coastal state can be called upon to do what? To do something about it. There are so many rights. Why this law is like this, and very important to watch it out. For you to know when there is incursion into your territory. For you to know when somebody is unlawfully extracting resources belonging to your country. So it's such a beautiful law. Then the next one in the international, I'm not going to go through the whole of them, is the International Maritime Law Organization Convention. This is a convention that established the International Maritime Organization. The International Maritime Organization, as an agency, is responsible for reading out international laws, statutes on maritime practice and procedure. But one thing here is that Nigeria has signed most of these laws without domesticating them. So if you are a signatory to an international law, for which you have not domesticated, it still means nothing. Right, so we look at those institutions that are given powers to administer our maritime domains. The first one here is NIMASA, Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency. This body is empowered to regulate the usage of the seas, to also regulate how we bring in strangers to our waters, as far as and also our seaports. In the usage of our seaports and maritime world, it is NIMASA that is in charge. NIMASA is also in charge of training seafarers, dock workers, to the various other established agencies. Then I want to talk about NESRA, National Environmental Standards and Regulation Enforcement Agency. This agency is the one that has repealed FEPA, that is the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. When it was like moribund, they decided to do away with it and create NESRA, for NESRA to ensure that the environmental space of Nigeria is kept clean and unpolluted. But I can tell you that despite the powers vested on them, on this body by Section 7, nothing significant has been done by this body. Then, Nigerian Armed Forces. Section 217 of the Constitution creates the Nigerian Armed Forces, which comprises the Army, the Navy, and the police. The Air Force. Now, the body that is directly relevant to our discourse is the Navy. So when I talk about Navy, I feel proud of my traditional ruler. So he's a naval officer. So the Navy is that body that has been given the powers to exercise the military domain of Nigeria over Nigerian territorial waters. But the question is that if they are doing their work well, why do we keep losing ships? Why do we keep complaining of oil theft? So those are begging questions that they need to answer. Even though they have carried out several operations, such as Operation Eagle Eye against weak persons, Operation Sarecheku, Operation River Sweep, when they were pursuing the militants. So, and it is on record that the Navy bought